A few weeks ago, a coworker pulled me aside between patients. She asked me a question I get almost every shift. Dr. Coyce, are there any vitamins or supplements I can take to stop getting sick all the time? It's a great question, and it's the reason I decided to make this episode. Because the honest answer, which I'll get into in a minute, is one you are very unlikely to hear from a wellness influencer. It isn't, yes, take this. It isn't, no, it's a scam. It's the evidence for most of the things people take to avoid getting sick is weaker than the marketing makes you think. And the biggest levers you have to avoid viral illnesses don't come in a bottle. The biggest thing you can do to avoid becoming acutely unwell from a viral infection is to avoid the pathogen in the first place. That means washing your hands, and I mean really washing them, with soap and water for 20 seconds, or using alcohol-based hand sanitizer. It means wearing a well-fitted N95 mask when you're going to be in close proximity to a lot of people, especially during cold and flu season. And that is especially true for those who work in healthcare or if you live with small children, those lovely, snotty, beautiful little human petri dishes that go to school and daycare. And it means staying up to date with your vaccinations, including your annual flu shot and your COVID booster if you're eligible. This episode isn't going to be about how to fight infection, but about the hidden dangers of relying on big wellness for your information. But before we get into that, please hit the like and subscribe and alert bells so you never miss any of our content. A few months back, I saw an older gentleman in the department. He was in his 70s, living on Social Security, about $60 a day. He'd come in with some vague abdominal symptoms, a little bit of nausea and some diarrhea. Nothing catastrophic, nothing requiring admission. What made the case memorable wasn't the medicine, it was the social history. He told me he was eating his lunches and dinners at the local senior center, free meals. That's how he was feeding himself on his limited income. And in the same conversation, he mentioned he was spending money, real money, on his fixed income on a herbal supplement he'd been told that would help his gut health. Think about that for a second. A man who cannot afford to buy his own groceries, who is relying on a community center to feed him, is being separated from a portion of his limited income by a supplement company. That to me is the clearest possible illustration of what we are dealing with today. The supplement industry is, in many cases, grifting off the vulnerable. And the vulnerable are not always who you'd expect. It's your grandmother. It's the coworker who is exhausted. It's the patient with a new cancer diagnosis looking for hope in a bottle. So in this episode, we're going to do two things. First, we're going to walk through the supplements that actually have evidence behind them. The ones where, in the right situation, spending your money might make sense. And second, we're going to look at some of the most heavily marketed supplements of 2026, including peptides. And we're going to ask a very simple question. Where is the evidence? By the end of this episode, my goal is that you'll be able to walk over to your medicine cabinet or your Amazon subscription list and make an informed decision about which supplements to keep and which ones to throw out, so you can put that money into something that actually moves the needle on your health or into your retirement account. Let's go. If you're new to the show, welcome. And let me remind you of the two-tier framework we use on this show. Starting with tier 1. It's the foundation. It's the 5 things that actually determine whether you have fewer bad days and more good decades. What you eat, how you move, how you sleep, how you handle stress, and whether you have a primary physician who knows you and is screening you for disease. Tier 2 is everything else. It's the supplements, the cold plunges, the saunas, the wearables, red light therapy, and dare I say, the peptides. Those are your fixtures and your upgrades. And every single supplement we are going to discuss today is by definition a tier 2 intervention. Which means this, if your tier 1 is not locked in, there is essentially no reason to be spending money or time on tier 2. A multivitamin does not make up for sleeping 5 hours a night. Creatine does not make up for not going to the gym. Berberine does not make up for a diet that is 80% ultra-processed food. That framing matters, and we'll come back to that at the end. But first, let's zoom out and talk about why the supplement industry in the United States looks the way it does. In 1994, Congress passed a piece of legislation called the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, DSHEA. It's a piece of law that most people have never heard of, but it shapes every single supplement bottle you have ever picked up in the United States. Under DSHEA, dietary supplements do not need to be proven safe before they go to market. They do not even need to be proven effective before they go to market. Contrast that with the pathway for a prescription drug or a vaccine. To get FDA approval for a new drug, a company typically has to run phase 1 trials to establish safety in a small group of healthy volunteers, then phase 2 trials to establish early efficacy in the target population, then large phase 3 trials, typically involving thousands of patients to confirm efficacy and characterize safety at scale. Then that data gets submitted to the FDA, reviewed by an independent advisory committee, and if approved, the drug gets monitored in a post-market surveillance system that continues forever. For a supplement under DSHEA, the requirement is that the manufacturer is not allowed to make specific disease claims. That's basically it. That's why you see careful marketing language on the bottle, like supports healthy immune function, promotes joint comfort, helps maintain cardiovascular wellness. Those are not clinical endpoints. Those are marketing terms that have been carefully engineered to get around DSHEA restrictions without triggering FDA action. Now, here's the part I think most listeners don't appreciate. The global wellness industry, which includes supplements, wellness tourism, spas, and adjacent categories, is valued at approximately $6.8 trillion per year, with projections to reach $9.8 trillion by 2029. The global pharmaceutical industry is valued at approximately $1.6 trillion per year. Read that again. The global wellness industry is more than 4 times the size of the global pharmaceutical industry. I raise this because you will frequently hear wellness influencers say that physicians are beholden to big pharma, that we are compromised by financial influence from the drug industry, and that we only recommend medications because we are paid to. Put aside for a moment whether any individual physician has conflicts of interest, which, by the way, are disclosed in every peer-reviewed paper we publish, and are searchable in a federal database called Open Payments. Step back and ask which of these two industries has more to gain from selling you something. The one that is regulated by an agency with the power to pull a product off the market, or the one that is 4 times larger and is effectively unregulated at the point of sale. Now, I'm not saying the pharmaceutical industry is morally pure. It isn't. But when a wellness influencer with a 10% discount code tells you that your physician is compromised, I'd ask you to examine who is actually standing to profit from the transaction being suggested to you. All right, let's go through the supplements where the evidence is reasonable. I want to be clear about what reasonable evidence means. It means there is at least one, and usually several, well-conducted systematic reviews and meta-analyses of randomized controlled trials showing a measurable effect on a meaningful outcome. Not surrogate markers that change by 2%. Actual endpoints that people care about. And we'll go through 5. Creatine, vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium, and multivitamins. So let's start off with creatine monohydrate. Creatine is, in my opinion, the most boringly well-evidenced supplement on the planet. If you take all the peer-reviewed literature on creatine and stack it up against the peer-reviewed literature on any trendy supplement, NAD precursors, berberine peptides, it's not even close. Creatine wins by orders of magnitude. The mechanism is simple. Creatine is a small molecule your body uses to regenerate ATP, the energy currency of your cells, during short, high-intensity work. Supplementation increases the amount stored in your muscles and, to a lesser extent, your brain. For strength and body composition, a 2024 systematic review and meta-analysis published in Nutrients by Wang and colleagues looked at creatine supplementation combined with resistance training in adults under 50. Across 23 studies, creatine plus resistance training produced greater gains in muscle strength than resistance training alone. Note that caveat, plus resistance training. Creatine does not replace going to the gym. It enhances what the gym gives you. For older adults, which is the population I care about most when I think about longevity, a 2025 meta-analysis performed by Sharafian and colleagues analyzed 20 studies with over 1,000 participants, 69% of whom were women. Adding creatine to an exercise program in older adults produced statistically significant improvements in 1-rep max strength. When you are 75 years old and you're trying to get off the toilet, the amount you can push matters. When you are 80 and you stumble, the amount of muscle you have determines whether you can catch yourself or break your hip. What about for the brain? A 2024 systematic review and meta-analysis by Zhu and colleagues analyzed 16 randomized control trials with 492 participants, looking at cognitive function across memory, executive function, attention, and processing speed. The signal was strongest in older adults and in states of cognitive stress like sleep deprivation and mental fatigue. Younger, well-rested, well-nourished people showed less benefit, which makes physiological sense. If your baseline brain creatine is already high, there's less room to move to gain an improvement. So how do you actually use creatine? The dose is of creatine monohydrate, 3 to 5 grams per day. It's extremely safe. The most common side effect in the literature is mild gastrointestinal upset at high doses and a small amount of water retention in muscle, which is a feature, not a bug. Creatine does not damage your kidneys in healthy people. This is a myth that will not die, and it is not supported by any randomized control trial that I'm aware of. The bottom line is that if you are doing resistance training, especially as you age, supplementing creatine is reasonable. If you are not doing resistance training, you are getting a fraction of the benefit, and you should probably spend your money somewhere else, like on a gym membership or a pair of dumbbells. Number 2, vitamin D. This one is a little more nuanced, and I want to be careful with it. Vitamin D is not a universal, everyone should take this supplement, but it is also not useless. The best single reference on vitamin D right now is 2024 systematic review published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism by Shah and colleagues. This systematic review was explicitly designed to support the updated Endocrine Society clinical practice guidelines. They screened 37,000 citations and included 151 studies. They used the GRADE methodology, which is the gold standard for grading certainty of evidence. Here's what they found. In healthy adults aged 19 to 74, routine empiric vitamin D supplementation did not significantly affect most clinical outcomes. In adults aged 75 and older, there was a very small but clinically important reduction in mortality. In pregnant women, low certainty evidence suggested possible benefits on maternal, fetal, and neonatal outcomes. In adults with prediabetes, there was moderate certainty evidence of reduction in progression to type 2 diabetes. What that tells me is this. If you're over 40 years old, work indoors, and otherwise healthy, taking vitamin D in the absence of a documented deficiency is unlikely to be life-changing. If you're 78, if you have prediabetes, if you are pregnant, or if you have a documented deficiency on a blood test, vitamin D supplementation is probably reasonable. The other thing worth noting is that the 2025 VITAL trial secondary analysis found that 2,000 international units of vitamin D3 daily reduced telomere shortening over 4 years, which is an interesting signal for biological aging, though the clinical significance is yet to be determined. If you're going to take vitamin D, 1,000 to 2,000 international units per day is a reasonable dose for most adults. Don't take gigantic weekly doses you sometimes see prescribed, the 50,000 international unit weekly regimens, without supervision by a physician. Intermittent high dosing has been associated with increased falls in older adult literature. Number 3, omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3 is one of the most commonly purchased supplements in America, and the evidence for its benefit in the general population, the audience I'm speaking to right now, is much weaker than most people realize. The landmark trial here is the VITAL trial, published by Manson and colleagues in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2019. This was a randomized, placebo-controlled primary prevention trial of 1 gram per day of marine omega-3 fatty acids in 25,871 US adults. Men were over 50 and women were over 55, followed for a median of 5.3 years. The primary cardiovascular endpoint was not significantly reduced. The primary cancer endpoint was not significantly reduced. Subgroup analyses suggested a possible benefit in people with below median fish intake, but these are exploratory findings and should not be treated as definitive. Where omega-3 does have evidence is in specific high-risk situations. The Reduce It trial, which used high-dose purified EPA at 4 grams per day as a prescription medication in patients with elevated triglycerides and on a statin, showed a 25% reduction in major cardiovascular events. There are also some criticisms of this trial as well. The placebo group was given mineral oil, and some have suggested that this may have actually increased LDL in the control group, exaggerating the benefits of the fish oil. Then, when you look at the Strength trial, which used corn oil as a placebo, there was no difference in cardiovascular outcomes. Now, I'm an emergency room doctor, so what do the cardiologists say? Well, the American Heart Association's scientific advisory is clear. For primary prevention in the general population, there is currently insufficient evidence for fish oil supplementation. The best dietary approach is to eat oily fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel, and herring, once or twice per week. The food source outperforms the supplement in observational data. The bottom line here is that if you are not eating fish, a moderate dose omega-3 supplement is reasonable and unlikely to cause harm. If you are a healthy adult who eats fish twice a week, you almost certainly don't need a fish oil supplement. Number 4, magnesium. Magnesium is the cheapest, most boring, and arguably underused supplement on this list. And it's also one where the evidence is genuinely interesting. The best single reference here is the 2024 Umbrella meta-analysis, which is a meta-analysis of meta-analyses, the highest level of evidence synthesis we have. It was performed by Al-Haran and colleagues. They pooled 10 review papers covering 8,610 participants. Magnesium supplementation produced a statistically significant reduction in both systolic and diastolic blood pressure. The effect was more pronounced at doses of 400 milligrams per day or higher, and with treatment durations of 12 weeks or more. Now, this is not a magic bullet. A 3 or 4 point reduction in systolic blood pressure is not going to get you off your antihypertensive medication. But a few points matters, because the relationship between blood pressure and cardiovascular events is basically linear across the distribution. Magnesium also has a reasonable evidence base for migraine prevention. A 2018 systematic review by von Luckner concluded that there is rationale to recommend magnesium for migraine prophylaxis, particularly in patients who do not tolerate first-line agents. Where magnesium gets underappreciated is in the population that is actually deficient. Many Americans don't meet recommended daily intake through diet, especially if they don't eat many leafy greens, legumes, nuts, or whole grains. People on proton pump inhibitors are at increased risk. People with type 2 diabetes often have low intracellular magnesium. The typical dose is 200 to 400 milligrams of elemental magnesium per day. Glycinate and citrate forms are well tolerated. Oxide is cheap but poorly absorbed and tends to cause looser stools. It wouldn't be a bad idea to supplement with magnesium. Just don't blow the budget and focus on getting those plant foods on your plate first. Number 5, multivitamins. The multivitamin question has been debated for 30 years, and for 30 years the answer was basically, there's no good evidence. That changed slightly in 2022 with the Cosmos trial, which was published by Sesso and colleagues in JAMA. It randomized 21,442 older adults to a daily multivitamin or placebo, with cancer as the primary endpoint, and a follow-up time of 3.6 years. The multivitamin group had a statistically significant 8% reduction in total cancer incidence. This is the first large RCT to show cancer incidence benefit from a daily multivitamin, and it's a modest signal in an older population. That said, I want to be honest about limitations. An 8% relative risk reduction in over 3.6 years is not enormous. It was not accompanied by a benefit on the cardiovascular co-primary endpoint. And we have to balance this against earlier trials. The SELECT trial found that vitamin E supplementation, for example, increased prostate cancer risk by 17%. The CARET trial found that beta-carotene supplementation in smokers increased lung cancer incidence by 18%. Supplements are not automatically safe. More is not always better. My honest take on multivitamins is that if you're older, if your diet is imperfect, a basic, cheap, non-mega dose multivitamin is a reasonable form of nutritional insurance. It is not a substitute for a varied, plant-rich diet. It's a hedge. Now let's move on to the supplements with very large marketing budgets and very small evidence bases. Number 1, NAD precursors, NMN and nicotinamide ribosate. You have almost certainly seen this one on your feed. NAD, or nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, is a coenzyme that is essential for basically every cellular process that involves energy. NAD levels decline with age. That is a true biological observation. Supplements like NMN, nicotide mononucleotide, and NR, nicotinamide riboside, are precursors that can raise NAD levels in the blood when taken orally. And that is true. The question, and the only question that actually matters, is whether raising NAD levels by an oral supplement translates into any clinically meaningful outcome. Now, the best reference here is a 2024 systematic review and meta-analysis by Zhang and colleagues. They reviewed over 4,000 manuscripts and included 12 RCTs with 513 participants. NMN supplementation did significantly elevate NAD levels in the blood. That was a positive finding. Everything else was negative. There was no significant effect on fasting glucose, triglycerides, total cholesterol, LDL, HDL, or most other clinically relevant metabolic markers. The authors, in their own words, concluded that an exaggeration of the benefits of NMN supplementation may exist in the field. That is a remarkable sentence to find in a peer-reviewed systematic review, and it should be your first clue that the marketing is running well ahead of the data. And there's a separate issue. In 2022, the FDA declared NMN an investigational new drug, meaning it cannot legally be sold as a dietary supplement in the United States. The products are still available, often through offshore vendors, but the regulatory status is murky. IV NAD drips, which are sold at wellness clinics at significant expense, have essentially no randomized controlled trial evidence supporting any clinical benefit. If you are spending $100 or $200 a month on NAD precursors, you are spending it on a supplement that reliably changes a blood marker but has not been shown to change any outcome that you should care about. Number 2, berberine. Berberine has had a remarkable moment on social media. It has been called nature's Ozempic, which is an excellent example of how marketing works. GLP-1 medications like semaglutide and tirzepatide are producing 15 to 25% weight loss in rigorously designed phase 3 trials involving tens of thousands of patients. Berberine is being marketed as the same thing but natural and cheaper. So what does the evidence actually say? The best recent reference is a 2025 systematic review and meta-analysis by Liu and colleagues, which included 12 randomized placebo-controlled trials on berberine. In patients with metabolic syndrome, not healthy adults, berberine significantly reduced triglycerides, fasting plasma glucose, LDL, cholesterol, and waist circumference. So there's a real signal there, but notice what's there and what isn't. The signal is in people with metabolic syndrome, abdominal obesity, elevated triglycerides, low HDL, hypertension, and elevated fasting glucose. Not in healthy adults who are taking it because they saw a TikTok video. The effect sizes are modest. Berberine reduced triglycerides by about 30 milligrams per deciliter in one meta-analysis. That's meaningful, but it's not GLP-1 levels. It also has real drug interaction. Berberine inhibits cytochrome enzymes, which metabolize a range of medications, including statins, anticoagulants, and many psychiatric medications. It can cause GI side effects, and it should not be taken in pregnancy where there is a signal for neonatal jaundice. If you have metabolic syndrome, you already have evidence-based, FDA-approved treatments, lifestyle modification, metformin, GLP-1 receptor agonists, that have been studied in tens of thousands of patients. Berberine is not the same class of intervention, and it is not a substitute. Number 3, collagen. The collagen market is massive. It is marketed for skin, hair, nails, joints, bones, gut health, and basically any tissue that contains connective tissue. So here is the most recent and I think illuminating piece of evidence on this. In 2025, Myung and colleagues published a systematic review and meta-analysis in the American Journal of Medicine. They analyzed 23 RCTs with 1,474 participants, looking at collagen supplements for skin hydration, elasticity, and wrinkles. The overall pooled result looked good, significant improvements across all 3 outcomes. Then they did a subgroup analysis by funding source, whether the study was funded by a supplement company or not. In the industry-funded studies, collagen supplements significantly improved skin hydration, elasticity, and wrinkles. In the studies that were not funded by the supplement industry, there was no significant benefit for any of the three outcomes. They did the same thing stratified by study quality. High-quality studies, those that used proper blinding and proper methodology, showed no significant benefit. The low-quality studies did show a benefit. I want you to sit with that for a second. The better designed the study, the less conflicted the funding source, the more the effect disappeared. That is textbook signature of publication bias and methodology bias. It's one of the cleanest examples of this phenomenon I've seen in the supplement literature. The other thing worth noting is the mechanistic problem. When you eat collagen, your body breaks it down into amino acids, just like any other protein. There is no biological mechanism by which those amino acids are preferentially reassembled into collagen in your skin versus some other use. So if you're eating adequate protein, you are already giving your body everything it needs to make collagen where it needs it. A collagen supplement is a more expensive way to get an inferior amino acid profile compared to whey, soy, or a varied protein diet. Number 4, detox and cleanse supplements. This one I'll keep brief because there is no meta-analysis to meta-analyze. A 2015 review in the Journal of Human Nutrition and Dietetics by Klein and Kiat examined commercial detox diets and concluded that there was no compelling evidence to support their use. Let me be direct. Detox is a marketing term, not a medical term. Your liver and your kidneys are your detox system. They're extraordinary, in fact. At certain times in medical school, they were each my favorite organ. Right now, it's the heart. And they're already working. The products being marketed as detoxes, charcoal cleansers, liver flushes, toxin removers, colonic supplement protocols have no randomized trial evidence of benefit for any clinical outcome. And some of them are actually harmful. The grift here is a very specific shape. An online practitioner, often not a licensed physician, will offer you a test for inflammation or food sensitivities or gut dysbiosis, usually using a test that has not been validated for clinical use, like an IgG food sensitivity panel or a certain class of stool microbiome tests, because you can always find abnormalities if you look at enough markers. And then they will sell you the protocol to fix those abnormalities. A detox pack, a gut repair kit, a functional medicine subscription. This is the business model. And if the person selling you the test is also selling you the supplement that treats that result, that is not medicine. That is a vertically integrated sales funnel. I want to spend some real time on peptides because this is the area where the gap between marketing and evidence is, in my view, the widest right now. And the regulatory landscape just shifted in a way that makes the public conversation more confused, not less. What is a peptide actually? A peptide is just a short chain of amino acids. Your body makes thousands of them every day. Many approved medications are peptides. Insulin is a peptide. Semaglutide or Ozempic is a peptide. These are rigorously studied compounds with enormous randomized trial datasets behind them. When influencers talk about peptides though, they are usually not talking about insulin or semaglutide. They are talking about a different category. Compounds like BPC-157, TB500, CJC-1295, and others. These are not FDA-approved drugs. They are compounds that until recently existed in a grey market between research chemical vendors and compounding pharmacies. In late 2023, the FDA placed 19 peptides in its Category 2 drug substance list, effectively ending compounding pharmacies' ability to prepare them under Section 503A. The stated reason was that there is insufficient safety data. On February 27, 2026, on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast, HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announced that approximately 14 of those peptides would be moved back to Category 1, restoring legal access through licensed compounding pharmacies with a physician's prescription. The peptides affected include BPC-157, TB500, CJC-1295, and others. As of recording of this episode, the formal FDA rulemaking is still in progress. The FDA is planning advisory committee meetings in July 26 and February 27 to work through the specifics. I want to flag an important subtlety here because it gets consistently misreported. Reclassification to Category 1 is not FDA approval. It means a compounding pharmacy can legally prepare the peptide under a physician's prescription. It does not mean the peptide has gone through phase 3 clinical trials. It does not mean the FDA has determined it is safe and effective. It means the regulatory pathway for access has been reopened. That is a very different thing from FDA approval. Let's look at the BPC-157 evidence base. BPC-157 is probably the most hyped peptide right now. It is marketed for tissue healing, tendon repair, gut health, and inflammation. So what is the evidence? The best reference here is a 2025 systematic review published in HHS Journal by Vassaretti and colleagues. They searched literature from database inception through June 2024. They screened 544 articles. After applying their inclusion criteria, they included 36 studies. Of those 36 studies, 35 were preclinical animal studies. Just one was a human clinical study. And that human study was a retrospective case series of 12 patients with knee pain who got intra-articular BPC-157 injections with no control group. Let me repeat that. 35 rat studies, one uncontrolled retrospective case series in 12 human subjects. That is the entire published evidence base for a compound that is being sold across hundreds of clinics in the United States for thousands of dollars per month. Not phase 3 trials with primary endpoints, 35 rat studies, and a case series. When I asked the weight loss coach on the socials, who is recommending a dosing regimen for BPC-157, where the safety and efficacy data is, they often point to a certificate of analysis from a compounding pharmacy. I want to be extremely clear about what that is. It is a document certifying that the vial contains what it says it contains, at the purity stated. That is not efficacy data. That is not safety data. That is a quality controlled document for manufacturing. A certificate of analysis tells you what is in the vial. It tells you nothing about whether the thing in the vial does what it claims or if it is safe. Does what is claimed or if it is safe. Let's talk about retatrutide and the integrity of the process. I want to contrast BPC-157 with another peptide, one that is being studied the way a drug should be studied. Retatrutide, sometimes called RETA. It's a triple agonist peptide developed by Eli Lilly that targets 3 receptors, GLP-1, GIP, and glucagon. It's currently in phase 3 trials for obesity. A 2024 systematic review and meta-analysis pooled 3 randomized controlled trials involving 878 patients. The results were remarkable. A mean reduction in body weight of over 14% compared to placebo, along with significant improvements in HbA1c, blood pressure, and waist circumference. The phase 2 trial at the 12 milligram dose showed a mean weight loss of 24% at 48 weeks. This is highly promising, but, and this is a key point, retatrutide is not yet FDA approved. It's still going through phase 3 trials. The TRIUMPH program is running multiple large RCTs right now, specifically to characterize long-term efficacy, long-term safety, and identify any rare adverse events that wouldn't show up in smaller trials. The FDA is not going to approve it until that work is done. That's not gatekeeping. This is the process that keeps people safe. And it's the same process that brought us safe, effective GLP-1 medications that are genuinely transforming the care of metabolic disease. Skipping that process for RETA or for BPC-157 because a podcast host likes it is not a coherent position. It blows my mind, frankly, how many of the people who are right now loudly pushing experimental peptides like BPC-157 based on 35 rat studies are the same people who a few years ago argued that the mRNA COVID vaccines didn't have enough data. So let's actually look at that comparison. Before we walk through some specific myths, I want to name the manipulation tactics at play in almost all of the supplement space. If you can spot these in real time, you could save yourself probably thousands of dollars. Tactic number 1, motivated reasoning. If the person recommending a supplement also benefits financially from you buying it via a discount code, an affiliate link, or a subscription, their reasoning is motivated. This does not automatically make them wrong, but it means you should demand a higher standard of evidence than you would from a source without that same conflict. Tactic number 2, appeal to nature. It's natural, so it's safe. Tobacco is natural, arsenic is natural, hemlock is natural. The naturalistic fallacy is one of the most reliable markers that someone is selling rather than informing. Tactic number 3, Anecdote as evidence. My friend took this and her brain fog went away. That's not evidence, that's a story. Randomized controlled trials exist specifically because the human brain is exquisitely good at pattern matching things that are not actually there. Placebo effects, regression to the mean, natural resolution of symptoms, confirmation bias. With these three filters in place, let's look at two specific myths. Myth number one, detox supplements help my body clear toxins. We covered this already. There is no meta-analysis because there is nothing to meta-analyze. Your liver and kidneys do this. This should be a red flag every single time. If the person recommending the detox also sells it to you, walk away. If someone's giving you a discount code, they might be a salesperson, not a clinician. Myth number two, peptides are safe and effective. The evidence is strong. I want to run you through a thought experiment, which I flagged earlier. I'm going to describe two randomized placebo-controlled trials to you, completely blinded. You won't know what either drug is. I'm going to tell you the number of participants, the primary endpoint, the result in the treatment versus the placebo groups, what the adverse events were, and the follow-up period. After I describe both, I'll ask which you would feel more comfortable being approved. Then I'll tell you what each one actually is. So trial number one. The design was a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, and multi-center. Participants included 43,448 adults aged 16 and older. The intervention was 2 doses of the study compound administered 21 days apart. The primary endpoint was prevention of confirmed disease events. The result, 162 endpoint events in the placebo group versus 8 in the treatment group, a 95% reduction. Safety, predominantly mild to moderate local and systemic reactions with no serious safety concerns identified in the primary analysis. A 6-month follow-up showed continued improvement to 91% against the primary endpoint. Now, trial number two. The design was a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. There were 338 adults with obesity or overweight who also had weight-related comorbidities. The intervention was a study compound administered subcutaneously once weekly at various doses. The primary endpoint was % in body weight change at 24 weeks. The result at 48 weeks at the highest dose was 24% mean weight loss versus 2% in the placebo. Gastrointestinal adverse events were common and they were dose related, up to 60% nausea at the highest dose. Serious adverse events occurred in approximately 4% of participants in both treatment and placebo arms. There was 1 case of acute pancreatitis at the highest dose of the trial substance. So that's 2 trials. Now tell me, which one of those 2 studies, based on the data I just described to you, sounds more like a rigorously tested intervention that an FDA advisory committee could confidently recommend for widespread use? If you said trial A, the 43,000 person trial with 95% efficacy against a hard endpoint and mild reactogenicity, I agree with you. That was the Pfizer-BioNTech BNT162b2 mRNA COVID vaccine, published in the New England Journal of Medicine in December 2020 by Pollock and colleagues. Trial B was the retatrutide phase 2 obesity trial, published in New England Journal of Medicine in 23 by Jastabroff and colleagues. It was an excellent trial, promising compound, not yet FDA approved because it still needs phase 3 data. And here's the point. The people who argued the mRNA COVID vaccines had insufficient data based on a 43,000 person double-blind placebo-controlled trial with a 95% efficacy signal against the primary clinical endpoint are in many cases the same people now recommending BPC-157 to their audience based on 35 rat studies and 1 uncontrolled case series of 12 humans. You cannot hold both positions simultaneously and claim to be evidence-based. You can pick one. You can say, I'm cautious about interventions with limited human data, and therefore I want more trials before I support mRNA vaccine and before I support peptides. That is a consistent position. Or you can say, I trust the regulatory process and I'll take both the vaccine and the approved GLP-1 medications and wait for more data before using experimental peptides. That is also a consistent position. What you cannot do is say the vaccine lacks evidence while simultaneously pushing a compound with a fraction of the data. Your one-line takeaway is that efficacy and safety data matters. Be skeptical of an influencer with a discount code. Be skeptical of the chiropractor cosplaying as a physician. The standard of evidence you demand should not change based on whether the recommendation aligns with your prior opinion. All right, let's land this episode by returning to where we started. Supplements as a category are tier 2 by definition. They are the upgrade pack. They do not replace the foundation. Let me be concrete about this. If your sleep is 5 hours a night, if you don't do any resistance training, if you don't have a primary care physician, if your diet is majority ultra-processed foods, there is zero amount of creatine, multivitamin, magnesium, or vitamin D that is going to substantively change your trajectory. It is like putting a spoiler on a car whose engine doesn't start. There are, however, a few specific scenarios where supplementation is genuinely reasonable, even tier 1 adjacent, because the nutrient in question is genuinely hard to get through diet alone in that person's situation. For example, a B12 supplement if you're a vegan or an older adult with documented low levels, or taking a long-term proton pump inhibitor, or metformin. Dietary B12 comes almost exclusively from animal sources, so supplementation is reasonable or even necessary, and it's cheap. An iron supplement if you are menstruating, pregnant, or have a documented iron deficiency anemia. A folate supplement if you are pregnant, planning pregnancy, or of reproductive age. This is a tier 1 recommendation. It substantially reduces the risk of neural tube defects. A vitamin D supplement if you are deficient, pregnant, or an older adult, or if you have prediabetes. A fiber supplement if you are on a calorie deficit or your diet is low in whole plant foods while you are trying to ramp that up. Psyllium is cheap and well evidenced. A protein supplement, whey, soy, pea, if you are training regularly and intensely and struggle to hit your protein target of roughly 1.2 to 1.6 grams per kilo of body weight from food alone. A multivitamin as nutritional insurance in older adults with imperfect diets. The Cosmos signal is modest but real. A creatine supplement if you are doing resistance training, especially as you age. A magnesium supplement if you have hypertension, migraines, or a known gap in dietary intake. Notice what all of these have in common. Each is targeted to a specific population or a specific nutritional gap. None of them is a general take this for longevity pitch. Each of them, in the right context, has either an evidence base from randomized control trials or a clear mechanistic and nutritional rationale. And none of them is going to run you more than $15 or $20 a month combined. Here's your action item. This week, go to your medicine cabinet or wherever you get your subscriptions from. Take everything out. For each one, ask 3 questions. Question number 1. Is there a specific medical reason I'm taking this? A documented deficiency, a guideline-based indication, a recommendation from my primary care physician. Question 2. Can I name the evidence? A meta-analysis, a landmark trial, a guideline. If the answer is I saw it on Instagram or my friend recommended it, that is a flag. Question number 3. What is this costing me per month? And what could that money do somewhere else? An index fund, a gym membership, a dietitian visit, a new pair of running shoes. If a supplement does not pass those 3 questions, throw it out. Cancel the subscription, put the money towards tier 1. And if you want to do one more thing, ask your primary care physician at your next visit which supplements, if any, they think you should be on based on your medical history. Not because a blood test company says you're deficient in 15 trace minerals, but because a physician who knows your actual risk profile looked at your actual situation. Let me come back to where we started. My coworker asking me whether there is a supplement that will keep her from getting sick. And my patient on Social Security eating free meals at the senior center while paying for a herbal product he'd been told would fix his gut. What I wish I could tell both of them, and what I hope you take away from this episode, is that no supplement is an easy fix for anything. There are a handful of situations where supplementation is well evidenced and reasonable. The rest of the multi-trillion-dollar wellness economy is at best untested and at worst designed to separate you from your money while adding nothing to your health. The tier 1 stack, diet, movement, sleep, stress management, and a primary care physician is not glamorous. There is no discount code, no one is making an affiliate commission off of your walk after dinner, but it is what actually determines whether you have fewer bad days and more good decades. If you found this episode helpful, do the things that help us reach more people. like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below. I actually read them and I'll answer questions in a future episode if there's a common thread. And visit drkois.com for the blog post, the references, and all of our past episodes. Until next time, keep chasing fewer bad days and more good decades. Stay skeptical, stay well, and I'll see you in the next one.